Refugees seeking safety as Iraqis battle Iraqis for control of their country as Saddam Hussein hangs on but stays out of sight.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Tonight, America after the war. Reporting from NBC News headquarters in New York is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Chaos continues in many parts of Iraq tonight as forces loyal to Saddam Hussein battle insurgents who are outraged by the terrible cost of the war that he caused. And this uprising is led by fundamentalist Muslims who may have direct ties to Iran. In the south, anti-government protests, violence, and takeovers are now reported in Basra and 11 other cities. Defeated Iraqi soldiers are said to be joining forces with pro-Iranian Shiite Muslims long opposed to Saddam Hussein. Unrest has been reported as well in Saddam's hometown, Tikrit. And in the north, Iraqi Kurds who were gassed by Saddam in the Iran-Iraq war claim that they now have taken a provincial capital, Erbil, along with 5 other towns. But the worst fighting is in the south, where Iraq, Iran, and Kuwait share a common area. American troops occupy parts of that same Iraqi territory, but apparently they're in no immediate danger. NBC's George Lewis tonight on the chaos and the risks.
The refugees streaming out of Iraq tell the same story over and over. Shooting and anti-government demonstrations in several cities. House-to-house fighting, bloodshed everywhere. They say that radical Shiite Muslims with ties to Iran seem to be leading much of the insurrection. Inside Iraq, the Americans and other allies occupy territory near Basra, but have only second-hand accounts of the violence. Do you get any sense of who's in control in Basra? Is it Saddam's people or is it the revolutionaries?
No, it's probably even right now, from what we're gathering, but they're still running.
The refugee tales of violence are about the only stories coming out of places like Basra. Journalists who've tried to get into the city have either been detained or turned back by Iraqi authorities. This is the last American checkpoint on the road to Basra. A Pentagon source says more than 30 journalists who've gone past here have not returned and are presumably in Iraqi custody. 2 Austrian newspapermen this evening said they had been detained and interrogated for 4 hours.
We didn't know what was going to happen to us. We didn't know whether they would take us into prison or some kind of camp or to Basra or whatever, or shoot us. No.
5 journalists have been arrested yesterday, and they are said to be brought to Baghdad, and then they congratulated us that our fate was a better one, and they released us.
The Kuwaiti government doesn't know what to do with all the people fleeing the violence. Kuwaiti soldiers simply turned this convoy of refugees back to Iraq. Many of them are camped out tonight somewhere alongside the road, hoping that someone will come to their aid soon. George Lewis, NBC News, near Basra, Iraq.
At the Pentagon in Washington, military intelligence experts believe that Saddam Hussein will survive this uprising, for the short term at least. NBC's John Dancy is at the State Department tonight, where they're working overtime trying to keep track of the many elements involved in the struggle. Kuwaiti hostages killed when they were trapped by American forces north of Kuwait City. They were buried in mass graves by American forces, many of the victims burned beyond recognition. Also in Iraq today, that country turned over to the Red Cross the last of the Allied prisoners, 35 in all, including 15 Americans. And among those Americans, Army Major Rhonda Cornum. She had been listed as missing in action. All those released will have to stay in Iraq an extra day, it turns out, because rain and high winds hampered flying today. Sunday, American troops were hearing rumors that another American servicewoman, Melissa Rathbun-Neely, had been killed in captivity. Rumors that gratefully turned out to be untrue. She was released yesterday. And today, she talked over a speakerphone to her family in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where news cameras have become a part of their lives.
Do you know how famous you are?
I found out.
The whole world knows you.
I know.
Specialist Rathbun-Neely was lucky. Not all the women in Operation Desert Storm were as fortunate. Today, the Pentagon disclosed another woman killed in combat and 1 more missing in action, raising this question: what happened to the law that says that American women aren't supposed to be involved in combat? More on that now from NBC's Andrea Mitchell.
Specialist Tina Garrett, a 25-year-old combat medic whose arm and leg were ripped by shrapnel from a landmine in southern Iraq.
There's a lot of yelling and screaming going on. And I just lied there and I watched and I looked up in the sky and just waited for somebody to get to me.
Don't tell her that women aren't permitted in combat units.
My job entails for me to go in where there may be firing.
Garrett is a single parent to 5-year-old Christina. In Desert Storm, more than 32,000 women shared the risks and, in some cases, the pain. Women like 2 Army Staff Sergeants who were listed as killed or missing today. And the 3 women reservists who died when the Scud hit their barracks, well behind the front lines. As their families mourn, one father, a 30-year military man, spoke sadly about his daughter's role.
We got to fight and do these things. I would more readily accept my son's death in combat than I would my daughter.
Women have been injured and killed, but Congress and the Pentagon still won't give them the pay, promotions, and honors that come with combat duty.
If they have the ability, the training, then they should be able to do that job wherever our nation needs them to do it.
Major Marie Rossi had the ability and the training. She flew dozens of supply missions to advancing divisions in Iraq.
Sometimes you have to disassociate how I feel personally about the prospect of going into war and, you know, possibly seeing the death that's going to be there. But personally, as an aviator and as a soldier, this is the moment that everybody trains for, that I've trained for, so, you know, I feel ready to meet a challenge.
On the day after the ceasefire, Major Rossi was killed in a non-combat crash. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News, Washington.
When Nightly News continues in a moment, Syria and Israel, maybe they will talk. And a shocking police scandal in Los Angeles tonight, white officers beating a black motorist, and an amateur cameraman records it all.